I want to start today with a little visualization exercise.
Okay.
I want you to close your eyes, unless you're driving. Please don't close your eyes if you're driving. But if you can, just imagine for a second that you are a landlord.
Okay, I'm picturing it. I've got the ring of keys, maybe a tool belt, probably a slightly worried expression about the plumbing.
Exactly. The plumbing. You own a second property. Maybe it's a nice little 3-bedroom in the suburbs that you, I don't know, inherited from an aunt.
Sure.
Or maybe a basement suite you rent out to college kids to help pay the mortgage. You know the drill, right? You are the one getting the call when the faucet leaks at 7 a.m. on a Sunday.
The dreaded Sunday morning panic. That's the moment you realize your weekend is completely over because a pipe burst.
Right. And you're vetting tenants yourself, you're checking credit scores, you're stressing out if the place sits empty for a month because, you still have to pay the bank. It's a very personal, hands-on, high-stress, small-scale existence.
You probably know your tenant's dog's name.
You definitely know the dog's name.
It's the classic American mom and pop investment, right? It's Bob down the street who owns the duplex. It's a relationship business, fundamentally.
No, take that image, that single house, that personal connection, that Sunday morning plumbing repair, and I want you to multiply it.
Okay, multiplying.
Don't just multiply it by 10. Don't multiply it by 100. Imagine owning over 80,000 single-family homes.
80,000.
Yeah.
That breaks the visualization. That's not a landlord. That's a small nation state.
It is a city, just scattered all across the map. Imagine a single entity owning enough driveways, front porches, and backyard fences that if you line them up, they would stretch across multiple states.
That's incredible.
Imagine collecting 80,000 rent checks digitally on the first of every single month.
It creates a visual that is almost impossible to wrap your head around. It just fundamentally changes the definition of what a landlord even is. It moves it from a role or a job into an industry.
And that is exactly what we are diving into today. We are looking at a company called Invitation Homes, Inc. You might see their ticker symbol on the New York Stock Exchange, INVH. But this isn't just a story about a stock or a real estate company. It is a story about a company born from the absolute ashes of the 2008 financial crisis that has fundamentally, and I think perhaps permanently, changed the DNA of the American housing market.
And that is such a critical distinction to make right at the start. We aren't talking about a really successful local property manager who just, kept growing.
No.
We are unpacking how a massive corporate entity industrialize the very concept of the landlord. We're going to look at how they make money, the massive machinery behind their operations, and the controversies that have dogged them every step of the way, from Wall Street bonds to, spider infestations.
Oh, we are definitely going to get to the spiders. I read the source material on that, and it is absolute nightmare fuel.
It's something else.
But first, let's set the table. We have pulled together a massive stack of sources for this deep dive. We've got detailed financial records, we've got the corporate history, which tracks their evolution, investigative reports from Reuters, coverage from the Wall Street Journal, and the legal filings.
All leading up to their very recent settlement with the FTC.
Exactly.
The mission here is really to understand the shift. We're moving from the era of the mom-and-pop rental to the era of the securitization of rental income.
Securitization of rental income. That sounds like the kind of phrase that makes people's eyes just glaze over at a cocktail party.
It does, but stick with us.
Eh?
Because by the end of this hour, you are going to understand exactly what it means. And more importantly, you're going to understand why it matters to anyone who lives in a house in America, whether you rent or own.
Why is that?
Because when you securitize a home, you change its purpose.
It really is a shift in the American dream. I just find myself incredibly curious about the mechanics of this. I mean, how does one company end up with 80,000 houses? They didn't just go to 80,000 open houses on Sunday afternoons and sign the guest book, right?
No, they certainly didn't. To understand Invitation Homes, you have to go back to the prehistory. You have to understand the soil that this whole thing grew out of.
Okay.
Specifically the period between, say, 2005 and 2011. And it starts with a group called the Treehouse Group.
Treehouse Group. It sounds whimsical, like a daycare center or maybe a tech startup with beanbag chairs and free kombucha.
It sounds friendly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But they were very astute, very aggressive investors. This group was formed in 2005 by Dallas Tanner and a few others in Arizona.
Yeah.
Now, think about Arizona in the mid-2000s. What comes to mind?
Heat, golf courses,
Yeah.
and the absolute epicenter of the housing bubble. I remember reading stories about people buying 3 houses with zero money down.
Precisely. Phoenix was ground zero. So when the subprime mortgage crisis hit, Phoenix wasn't just damaged, it was devastated. It was a foreclosure apocalypse.
Wow.
Prices were in free fall. Neighborhoods were hollowed out. I mean, you had streets where every other house had a bank notice on the window. Pools were turning green. And while most people were panicking or just losing their shirts, the Treehouse Group saw an opening.
This is the classic buy when there's blood in the streets mentality. While everyone else is running out of the burning building, they're running in.
Exactly. They looked at the carnage and they just saw math. Between 2010 and 2011, they executed a strategic pivot. They started buying distressed houses.
Buying the dip.
In a massive way. They bought 1,000 distressed houses in Phoenix. Now, for a local group, 1,000 houses is huge.
That's a huge portfolio.
This is really one of the first clear instances of private equity stepping in to buy rentals in the post-Great Recession landscape. They realized a fundamental truth. All these people losing their homes, they still needed a place to live.
That's a really poignant point. The families didn't evaporate. They weren't leaving Phoenix. They were just moving from the owner column to the renter column.
Exactly. The demand for shelter is inelastic. You need a roof. And Treehouse Group realized that if they owned the roofs, they captured that demand.
So they have 1,000 homes? That's a lot. If I owned 1,000 homes, I'd be retired on a beach somewhere.
Right.
But 1,000 isn't 80,000, so how do they make the jump to the big leagues?
That happens in 2012. And it involves a name everyone in finance knows. The heavy hitter.
Blackstone?
Blackstone Inc.
Yeah.
The private equity giant. The guys who deal in billions, not millions. They're the ones who buy entire companies, reshape them, and sell them for parts or profit.
Right.
So in 2011, Treehouse merged with a Dallas-based property management firm called Riverstone Residential. Then in the spring of 2012, Blackstone Inc. acquires the whole entity to form what we now know as Invitation Homes.
So Blackstone brings the checkbook.
They brought a war chest. This wasn't just an investment. This was an ignition sequence. This was the capital injection needed to scale up from regional player with a good idea to, national dominance.
And what followed was essentially a shopping spree unlike anything the housing market had ever seen in American history.
It was incredible.
I was looking at the timeline in the notes, and the speed is just breathtaking. Their first official purchase under the Invitation Homes banner was in April 2012.
Correct. April 2012 is the starting gun.
And within one single year, just 12 months, they spent $4 billion on 24,000 homes.
Just let that sink in for a moment. $4 billion in 12 months. If you do the math on that, that is roughly $11 million a day, every single day, for a year.
Every day.
Weekends, holidays, didn't matter. They were spending $11 million a day buying single-family homes.
That is just mind-boggling. Most people stress about buying one home over the course of 6 months. They were buying dozens, maybe hundreds a day.
They became the largest buyer of rental homes in the United States almost overnight. It was a blitz.
It brings up the logistics of that. How do you even buy that many homes that fast? You can't just drive around looking for sale signs. The paperwork alone would bury you.
You have to have a system. You have to industrialize the purchase process. They weren't just browsing Zillow. They were buying in bulk. For example, in April 2013, they made a single purchase in Atlanta.
One purchase,
buying 1,400 homes from Building and Land Technology for over $100 million. One signature, 1,400 deeds transferred.
Atlanta seems to be a recurring character in this story. Why Atlanta?
Well, Atlanta, Phoenix, Tampa Bay. These were specific markets that fit their criteria.
Right.
In Tampa Bay, for instance, between August 2012 and June 2013, they purchased 1,650 homes for $250 million. These areas had the perfect storm conditions, high growth potential, but shattered by the crisis.
And this is where we start to see the impact on the local markets, right? Because I imagine if you have a cash buyer coming in and sweeping up 1,600 homes, that has to do something to the ecosystem.
Oh, it absolutely does. It puts a floor under the falling prices, which some would argue stabilized the market. It stopped the free fall. If you were a homeowner in Tampa trying to sell in 2012, Invitation Homes might have been the only buyer in town. So in that sense, they saved some equity.
But there's a flip side.
There's always a flip side. It also changed the rental landscape immediately. In Tampa Bay, during that blitz, 85% of Invitation Homes' listings were priced above the average area rent of $1,200.
So they weren't buying these distressed homes to then offer affordable housing to the people who just got foreclosed on?
No. That is a key misconception. They were signaling a move toward higher-end rentals right away.
So buy low.
Buy low, renovate, sometimes just cosmetically, and rent high. This wasn't charity. It was aggressive arbitrage. They saw a gap between the depressed asset price, the house, and the potential cash flow, the rent.
Okay, let's unpack that strategy a bit more, because they weren't just throwing darts at a map of the U.S. They had very specific criteria for where they bought. The sources mentioned something called strike zones.
Strike zones. Yeah, it sounds like something out of a military briefing. And in a way, it was a tactical deployment of capital. A strike zone for invitation homes was a neighborhood that met a very specific Venn diagram.
What were the circles in that diagram? Because I assume they aren't buying rural farmhouses or downtown condos.
No. So circle one, desirability.
Mm.
These neighborhoods had to be near jobs, good schools, and transportation corridors. Places people wanted to live. They weren't buying in the middle of nowhere. They wanted the suburbs where the middle class strives to be.
Okay, that makes sense. You want tenants who want to be there. You want sticky tenants.
Exactly. If you have a kid in the local high school, you aren't going to move just because the rent goes up $50. You're sort of stuck.
Right.
Circle two, distress. These same desirable areas had to have high foreclosure rates. They were looking for the sweet spot where a nice neighborhood had been hit hard by the financial crisis.
So they're buying the nicest house on the block, or at least the house in the nicest block, but buying it from the bank after the family has been foreclosed on.
Essentially, yes. They were capitalizing on the mismatch between the quality of the neighborhood and the financial health of the current homeowners. They wanted the A location at the C price.
And that brings us to the target demographic. Who are they renting to? I think there's an assumption that rental homes means low-income housing or Section 8, but based on what you're saying about desirability, that doesn't seem to be the case.
Early on, there was a mix. About 16% of their portfolio was Section 8 affordable housing properties. But that shifted as the strategy matured. The Wall Street Journal noted that they moved to compete specifically at the high end of the rental market.
What does the typical Invitation Homes tenant look like today, based on the data?
The profile is quite specific and, surprisingly affluent. They're typically in their late 30s. They are families with children, so they need the space, the yard, the school district. And the household income is approximately $100,000.
$100,000. That is firmly middle to upper middle class. In many parts of the country, $100,000 is a very solid income.
Exactly. These are often people who, in a different economic climate, would be home buyers. They are the prime candidates for home ownership. But due to credit issues lingering from the crash or lack of a down payment or simply the scarcity of inventory, partly caused by investors buying up stock, they are renting.
It's a bit of a catch-22, isn't it? You earn $100,000, you want to live in a good school district, but the starter homes in that district are being bought by a corporation that rents them back to you.
Yes.
You are paying the mortgage, but it's someone else's mortgage.
That is the core tension of this entire phenomenon. You have a class of people who have the income to buy, but not the capital or the opportunity. And Invitation Homes steps in to monetize that gap. And the scale of this operation today is just massive. As of July 2024, Invitation Homes owns about 84,000 homes in 16 markets.
And I noticed a heavy concentration in certain areas. It's not evenly spread out across the 50 states.
No, very heavy. California is a major profit center for them. 17% of their total rental income comes from California alone. Which makes sense, right? Given the high property values and high rents there. If you control a significant chunk of single-family rentals in a tight market like Los Angeles or the Bay Area, you have tremendous pricing power.
But they aren't just buying old houses anymore, are they? This was a surprising detail in the research. I always pictured them as just scooping up existing stock, but they're actually builders now.
This is the evolution of the model.
Yeah.
Once you run out of distressed inventory, because eventually the market recovers and you can't buy foreclosures for pennies on the dollar, you have to find a new supply.
So you make your own.
You make your own. In 2021, they launched a joint venture with Polta Group.
Polta Group is one of the biggest home builders in the country. If you drive through a new subdivision, there's a good chance Pulte built it.
Right. And the plan was to build 7,500 new homes specifically for Invitation Homes to rent out.
So built to rent.
Exactly. We are moving from buying old distressed stock to purpose-built rental communities. Imagine an entire cul-de-sac or an entire neighborhood where no one owns the home they live in. Everyone pays rent to the same corporate landlord.
The mailboxes all look the same, the lawns are all cut by the same service.
And the rent checks all go to the same bank account.
That feels like a fundamental shift in how we view suburbs. It's almost like returning to a company town model. But the company isn't a coal mine or a factory. The company is the landlord itself.
It connects back to that idea of industrializing the landlord business. It allows for incredible efficiency. If you own every house on the street, your maintenance crew can hit 10 houses in an hour. But it also changes the social fabric. There are no homeowners associations led by residents. There's just the management company.
But here's the thing. To really industrialize it, to scale it to 80,000 homes, you need more than just rent checks coming in. You need Wall Street. You need massive leverage. And this is where the story gets really technical and I think really fascinating.
This is the financial engineering that makes the whole machine hum.
Right, because Invitation Homes didn't just invent a way to manage 80,000 homes. They invented a way to turn those homes into a financial product.
They created a new asset class. In 2013, Invitation Homes pioneered the single-family rental security, or SFR.
Okay, for those of us who don't have a Bloomberg terminal on our desk, let's break this down. What is an SFR security? How do you turn a house into a bond?
Think of it like a mortgage bond. You know how in the movie The Big Short, which I know you love, they explain how thousands of mortgages are bundled together into a bond that investors can buy.
Right, the mortgage-backed security. They take a bunch of loans, put them in a bucket, and sell slices of the bucket.
This is similar in structure, but the underlying asset is different. Instead of bundling mortgage payments, where the homeowner pays the bank Invitation Homes, bundles rental income.
Oh, wow.
They take the monthly rent checks from thousands of their houses, pool all that cash together, and sell bonds to investors based on that cash flow.
So if I'm an investor, a pension fund, or a hedge fund, I buy this bond and I get paid interest. And that interest is paid for by the rent money collected from families in Atlanta and Phoenix.
Precisely. You're buying a stream of rental income. And this was revolutionary for them. It allowed them to raise massive amounts of money to buy more houses. It's a flywheel.
Buy houses, rent them out.
Securitize the rent, get cash from investors, buy more houses.
So the house isn't just a place to live anymore, it's collateral for a bond.
Correct. It financializes the home. And the numbers are just staggering. By January 2017, they had sold nearly $10 billion in SFR bonds.
$10 billion.
By July 2018, that number hit $15 billion. It's a perpetual motion machine of capital.
But there was a moment in 2017 where this got a little controversial involving the government, right? Because up until now, this is just private equity doing private equity things. But then Uncle Sam got involved.
The Fannie Mae controversy. This is a crucial plot point. In January 2017, Fannie Mae, a government-sponsored entity designed to help Americans buy homes, guaranteed $1 billion of debt for Invitation Homes.
Wait, let me get this straight. Fannie Mae, whose entire mission is to support home ownership. It's right there in their charter-backed, the corporate landlord.
That was exactly the reaction. It was the first time in history a government-sponsored entity backstopped a single-family corporate landlord.
I can imagine that did not go over well with housing advocates.
No, it sparked a fierce backlash. More than 25 affordable housing groups criticized the deal. Their argument was simple and powerful. Fannie Mae exists to protect and encourage home ownership. It's supposed to help the little guy get a mortgage.
Right.
By backing Invitation Homes, they were effectively subsidizing a competitor to the individual homebuyer. They were helping the giant compete against the family trying to buy their first home.
It does seem like a conflict of interest. I mean, if Fannie Mae helps Invitation Homes get cheaper debt, Invitation Homes can bid higher on houses, pricing out the very people Fannie Mae is supposed to help.
That was the argument. Now, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, the FHFA, which regulates Fannie Mae, they had a justification.
What was it?
They claimed it was a way to learn about the mechanics of the single-family rental market. Their spokesperson, Corinne Russell, argued that since so many Americans were renting, the government needed to understand that market to see what their role should be.
It sounds like a very expensive experiment, or a very convenient excuse to help out a big player.
Depending on your cynical view of government and finance, yes. But regardless of the intent, the result was that Invitation Homes got cheaper financing, backed by the government-implied guarantee. It validated their model at the highest level.
And shortly after that, they went public.
February 2017, Invitation Homes IPO. It was the second largest real estate investment trust, or REIT, IPO in history, raising $1.77 billion. They were now a public company, answering to shareholders every quarter.
And they didn't stop growing there? They merged with another giant.
Yes. In November 2017, they merged with Starwood Waypoint. Starwood was another massive player in this space that had spun off from Starwood Capital Group. This merger consolidated their dominance. They became the undisputed heavyweight champion of the sector.
And interestingly, the architect of all this, Blackstone, eventually left the building.
They did. This is classic private equity life cycle. Blackstone divested its share in November 2019. They walked away with a significant gain. They saw the opportunity in the crisis, built the machine, took it public, waited for the stock to appreciate, and cashed out.
And Invitation Homes was now a standalone public giant.
Exactly.
So we have the machine. It's huge, it's publicly traded, it's backed by billions in bonds, and it owns 80,000 homes. But machines don't fix toilets, machines don't deal with termites, and this is where the rubber meets the road. Or perhaps where the sewage meets the basement.
This is the dark side of the efficiency. When you turn rental income into a bond, you have a fiduciary duty to your bondholders to maximize that income. That is your legal obligation.
Right.
And there are only two ways to maximize rental income: raise the rent or cut the costs.
And costs in this case means maintenance.
Exactly. The core critique of this entire business model, from housing advocates, from tenants, even from some financial analysts, is that corporations are incentivized to keep repair costs as low as possible. Reuters did a deep dive into the data, analyzing the bond documents.
What did they find?
They found that Invitation Homes spent an average of roughly $11,142 per year per house on maintenance.
Is that a lot? It sounds low. My parents definitely spend more than that on their house. A water heater alone is $1,000.
Well, compared to the average homeowner, who typically spends about $3,100 a year on maintenance.
So they were spending about a third of what a normal owner spends.
Roughly, yes.
Now, to be fair, the company disputed this, right? I want to make sure we represent their side. How do they justify that number?
They did. They argued that the Reuters data was incomplete. They said it missed some system backup costs and capitalized expenditures, which are essentially big renovations that are tracked differently than day-to-day repairs. They also argue that their scale allows them to get work done cheaper. Maybe they get a bulk discount on water heaters because they buy 5,000 at a time.
Or they have in-house handymen, so they aren't paying retail labor rates.
Right. But still, the gap, 1,142 versus $3,100, is stark. Even with a bulk discount, that's a massive difference. That implies something isn't getting fixed.
And that gap seems to manifest in the tenant experience. The list of complaints in the source material is, well, it's pretty visceral. It suggests that the efficiency comes at the cost of livability.
It does.
Yeah, let's talk about the horror stories. Media outlets like CBS Sacramento, WGCL-TV, and the Arizona Republic have done reports on this. What are tenants actually seeing?
We aren't talking about a squeaky hinge or a chipped paint job. We are talking about serious habitability issues, toxic black mold that isn't remediated properly, just, painted over.
Episode over mold.
We're talking about sewage backing up in the bathtubs and sitting there for days because the approval process for a plumber is too slow.
And the pests. That's the part that got me.
Vermin infestations. Spiders, cockroaches, ants. There was a specific mention of spiders in the Reuters report that really paints a picture of neglect. And there was a report from WGCL-TV about a home damaged by a tornado where the damage caused health issues for the tenants, and the response was allegedly just inadequate.
One detail that stuck out to me in the CBS Sacramento report was nails poking out of floors. That feels so specific and so negligent, it implies a rush job.
It implies cheap carpet installation or hurried renovations between tenants. In the industry, they call it turn and burn. Get the old tenant out, slap some paint on, put some carpet down, get the new tenant in.
And if you miss a nail, well, someone steps on it.
Speed is the priority over quality.
And the complaint isn't just that these things happen. I mean, houses break, pipes burst, bugs get in. It's the response time.
Right. Tenants report unfulfilled repair requests. Broken appliances like stoves and garage doors sitting breaking for weeks. If you are a mom-and-pop landlord and your tenant's stove breaks, you probably go to Home Depot that day or the next day because you don't want an angry tenant.
You have a reputation in the neighborhood.
You have a reputation. But if you are a corporation, roll 80,000 tenants, one angry tenant is a statistic.
Because if the goal is to keep that maintenance number at $1,100 to satisfy the bond rating agencies, you delay, you defer, you patch instead of replace.
Precisely. Every dollar spent on a plumber is a dollar not paid to the bondholder. The incentives are completely misaligned with the tenant's comfort. The tenant is the source of revenue, but the bondholder is the boss.
But it's not just about saving money on repairs. It's also about generating revenue through fees. We've heard about junk fees in the airline industry or banking, but how does it apply here?
This is the fee economy applied to housing. Reuters found a security bundle, one of those bonds, where the houses are making $1,538 a month in rent. But on top of that, they were bringing in an additional $985 per year per house in other fees.
Nearly $1,000 a year in extra fees. That's almost an extra month of rent. What on earth are they charging for?
Everything they can think of. Smart home fees? For the electronic lock they installed that you didn't ask for, air filter delivery fees where they mail you a filter you have to install yourself,
Oh, come on.
pet fees, utility management fees, it's death by 1,000 cuts.
There are class action allegations about late fees that were particularly egregious.
Yes, this was a major point of contention. They were reportedly charging $95 if a tenant was even 1 minute late.
1 minute.
1 minute past the deadline. And the allegations claimed they charged this even if the company's own online payment portal was broken and the tenant couldn't pay on time.
That is infuriating. It feels like you're trapped. You can't just move out easily because moving is expensive and disruptive, especially if you have kids in school. So you pay the $95.
It exploits the friction of moving. They know you don't want to leave, so they can squeeze the margins. They have the leverage.
And if you don't pay or can't pay,
Eviction. And this is where the industrialization gets really cold. A study by the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta in December 2016 shed some light on this. They compared corporate landlords to other landlords regarding eviction filings.
What were the numbers?
They found that corporate landlords were significantly more aggressive. Invitation Homes evicted 15% of its renters. Starwood Waypoint, this was before the merger, evicted 30%.
30%. That means 1 in 3 families living in a Starwood home got an eviction notice.
It is an incredibly high turnover rate. It suggests a zero-tolerance policy. And the study noted a racial disparity as well. It found that being African-American increased the chance of eviction under these companies.
Why the disparity? Is it deliberate bias or something else?
It's likely the result of automation. The automation of the eviction process, where an algorithm automatically files a notice the moment rent is late, removes the human element.
Right.
A mom-and-pop landlord might say, "Okay, Bob, I know you lost your shift this week. Pay me next Friday." The algorithm just executes the filing. And because of broader economic disparities, that rigid automation hits minority communities harder. It's blind justice, but it effectively penalizes the vulnerable.
This brings us to the legal and regulatory side of things. Because you can't operate like this, charging hidden fees, letting houses fall apart, evicting people by algorithm, without eventually attracting the attention of lawyers and eventually the government.
And they certainly did attract attention. Let's talk about the BPO loophole first. This is a technical regulatory blind spot that Invitation Homes exploited to enable their growth.
BPO stands for broker price opinion.
Correct. Now, after the 2008 housing crisis, the government tried to tighten up the rules. Congress banned BPOs for mortgages. They said, if you are going to lend money on a house, you need a real licensed appraiser to go inside, check the foundation, check the wiring, and give a real value.
You can't just have a real estate broker drive by and guess the price.
Exactly. That seems like a sensible rule to prevent another bubble. We don't want phantom value.
It is. But the law applied to mortgages. It didn't explicitly apply to bonds backed by multiple homes. So Invitation Homes could use BPOs for their securitizations.
So they were valuing these billion-dollar bond portfolios based on drive-by inspections.
Essentially, the SEC investigated this starting in 2017. They found Invitation Homes was using unlicensed contractors to inspect only the exteriors of the homes. They would just assume the interiors were renovated and in good condition.
Which explains the disconnect. The bond investors thought the houses were worth X because the outside looked nice, while the tenant living inside knew the stove was broken, the carpet was torn, and there were ants in the kitchen.
Exactly. The valuation was based on an assumption of quality that didn't always exist. It inflated the perceived value of the assets backing the bonds. It allowed them to borrow more money than perhaps they should have been able to.
And the tenants started fighting back. It wasn't just individual complaints anymore.
They organized. In May 2018, tenants in Northern California filed a class action lawsuit. They sued over excessive rent hikes and fees. In places like Oakland, Invitation Homes was raising rents by 10% per year.
10% is huge. Inflation's usually 2 or 3%. Wages definitely aren't going up 10%.
You know, it was double the norm for that market. And remember, Oakland has rent control for older buildings, but single-family homes often fall outside those protections, so they could push the rents as high as the market would bear.
I read about the protests in the notes.
Yeah.
That's a powerful image tenants marching on Blackstone's headquarters.
The Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment, or ACCE, organized those. It wasn't just holding signs. Tenants actually went into the offices in Santa Monica and placed letters on the executives' desks. They demanded meetings.
They said, look us in the eye and explain why my rent is going up $300 a month when you won't fix the mold.
Did they get the meeting?
The sources say the company never got back to them. They just ignored it, which strategically is what large corporations often do. They wait you out.
Silence speaks volumes. But while they might have ignored the tenants, they couldn't ignore the Federal Trade Commission forever. This all culminated very recently in September 2024.
The FTC settlement. This is the climax of the legal troubles we were discussing. Invitation Homes reached a settlement with the Federal Trade Commission.
And this was not a small slap on the wrist. They didn't just have to say sorry.
No, money changed hands. They agreed to refund $48 million to customers.
$48 million. That is a significant chunk of change. Even for a big company, that stings. What were the specific charges that led to that?
The FTC alleged unfair and deceptive tactics. And the list reads like a summary of everything we've discussed. Saddling people with hidden fees, unjustly withholding security deposits, and crucially misleading people about eviction policies during the pandemic.
Withholding security deposits is a classic bad landlord move. Oh, there's a scratch on the floor, I'm keeping your $2,000. But doing it at an industrial scale, something else entirely.
It turns nickel and diming into a multi-million-dollar revenue stream.
Yeah.
If you keep, say, $500 from every tenant who moves out, and you have 10,000 tenants move out a year, that's $5 million in pure profit.
Wow.
The settlement was a validation of years of tenant complaints. It forced the company to acknowledge, financially at least, that these practices were unacceptable.
So let's zoom out. We have covered a lot of ground here. We've covered the origin story in the Arizona desert, the massive buying spree fueled by Blackstone cash, the financial engineering with bonds and the Fannie Mae controversy, the maintenance horror stories, and the legal battles. What does this all mean for the listener?
It brings us back to that question of the American dream. For decades, the narrative was simple. You work hard, you save up, you buy a home. That was the primary vehicle for middle-class wealth creation. It was how you saved for retirement. It was how you passed something on to your kids.
And stability. Just knowing your landlord can't sell the building out from under you. Knowing you can paint the walls whatever color you want.
Exactly. But what Invitation Homes represents is a shift toward a rentership society. It's not just about owning a home anymore. It's about who owns the rental market.
Right.
When 80,000 starter homes are taken out of the purchase pool and moved permanently into the rental pool, it creates a scarcity for buyers.
It pulls the ladder up.
In many ways, yes. Those 80,000 homes are 80,000 families who aren't building equity. They are paying off a bondholder's investment instead of their own mortgage.
And it introduces a new dynamic. The efficiency of corporate management versus the personal touch of individual ownership. Sure, Invitation Homes has an app. You can pay your rent on your phone. That's efficient. But can you negotiate with an app when you lose your job?
Does the app care if your heater is broken in a snowstorm?
Yeah.
The data suggests it doesn't. The data suggests the app and the company behind it cares about the bondholder. And that is the fundamental misalignment. A mom-and-pop landlord wants the house to stay in good shape because it's their retirement nest egg. You have a personal stake in the physical asset. A corporate landlord wants the portfolio to yield a return. If one house rots, it's a rounding error as long as the fees across the other 79,999 cover it.
It's a sobering reality. We're really seeing the financialization of shelter.
That is the perfect phrase for it. Financialization of shelter. Taking a basic human need, a roof over your head, and turning it into a tradable, securitized financial product optimized for yield rather than livability.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a provocative thought. We talked about their new venture-building homes, specifically to rent.
The built-to-rent revolution.
If corporations continue to buy up single-family homes and now start building entire communities that are for rent only, are we moving toward a future where homeownership is obsolete for the middle class? Are we heading toward a permanent subscription model for housing?
It is a valid fear. Think about it. We subscribe to music with Spotify. We subscribe to movies with Netflix. We subscribe to software. We subscribe to food delivery.
Everything is a subscription.
If housing becomes just another subscription service, the wealth gap between the owners, the shareholders, and the subscribers, the tenants, will only widen. You never own the asset. You just pay for the privilege of using it.
And the most chilling part, in that future, your landlord isn't a person you can talk to. It isn't Bob from down the street. It's an algorithm that answers to the stock market.
And the stock market never sleeps. It has no empathy, and it certainly doesn't come over to fix the sink on a Sunday.
That's it for this week's Deep Dive. We hope this gave you a clearer picture of the giant owning the house next door.
Stay curious and read the fine print on that lease.
See you next time.